Seems fair to me.
Yes, it did.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this edition. Good to have you aboard. Lots to talk about and a great guest for next up, which we'll announce in just a moment. But first, let's meet the panelists, starting with Wendy Wiese from KTRS, Mr. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Ray Hartmann from St. Louis in the Know on KTRS, Raw Story, and the Riverfront Times, and from the St. Louis American, Alvin Reid. And on Next Up, the second half of our program, Bill and Wendy will talk to Steve Ellman, County Executive for St. Charles County, and that brings us, Ray, to our first topic, because he's in a public disagreement with the mayor of the city of St. Louis, and you had him on your program just a couple of weeks ago. I heard it, where you were talking about his plan, which he later wrote about in the St. Louis Business Journal, to have one prosecutor for St. Louis City and St. Louis County. Didn't mention St. Charles there. Yeah. He also, in this piece, suggests that the highway patrol be allowed to work inside the city of St. Louis without an invitation from the police chief, which is currently the regulation. And he'd like to have, what else is he looking for? A few other matters when it comes to regional governance, like he wants the whole region to oversee the airport. And he's got some other ideas too, but the mayor said, in a KMWX interview, I believe, that she's tired of being talked down to. What do you think?
I think she's right, and I think that Steve Ellman has the potential to be a voice for regionalism, and this is the opposite of that. It's very disappointing. I think that, you know, certainly in St. Charles, the prosecutors had his own problems with stalking allegations and DWIs, and I don't think people in St. Charles County would at all, despite that, want to hear that maybe St. Charles County should merge its efforts with Lincoln or Franklin Jefferson County so we can fix things up there. I think it's very, it's part of a Republican kind of patronizing attitude toward the city, and it's always a little ironic to have as dysfunctional body as the state legislature judging the city or anybody on anything. I think that we ought to, you know, where the Cardinals going into the playoffs, this is the time we're all coming together as a region. Maybe we ought to respect each other a little more and respect each other's boundaries.
Well, I agree. I think that Ellman was off base on this. And the other thing he wanted to do was give the police department control back to the state.
Correct, correct, Bill. Thank you.
You know, I think that essentially what he's trying to do is deactivate Kim Gardner. I mean, it's what Eric Schmidt wanted to do when he wanted to come in and take over murder cases. And, you know, I understand the feeling. I think that her tenure has not been a successful one, but she's the elected prosecutor. And I think the idea that we're going to change the law so there's only one prosecutor with the hope that citizens won't elect Kim Gardner, it's just a bad idea.
Well, and let's make the distinction, though, that Tim Lomar's problems seem to be of a personal nature. Kim Gardner's problems seem to be of a professional nature and in office in chaos.
That's a judgment. That's a judgment for the voters.
But no, if you look at the two, okay, which is worse? You are the prosecutor charged with a crime. You are the prosecutor, and I don't like how you do your job. The one in St. Charles is a bigger problem to me, allegedly, if he did do this. I will say also that I find it interesting that if I were to, like, you know, be the mayor of Kirkwood and say, like, you know what, I've got some plans, but they're for those 87 other municipalities and not mine. It's like, well, then why did you even open your mouth out?
Well, now, hang on. This is, you know, this is a trick that people play now when they're politicians, and I like Steve Ellman. But isn't it also possible that he's pulling a Corey Bush or an Eric Schmidt, where you throw something out that's outlandish, and before you know it, you're on KMWX, you're in the Business Journal, you're on the Ray Hartmann show, you're being talked about on...
That leads me to where I was going with that, which is, okay, where's this coming from? What office is he looking at? What job is he looking at?
County executive.
Like, does he want to be...
Second Tuesday in November.
Well, I'm just saying that what exactly beyond St. Charles is in your pale, kind of,
Well,
like.
I will say, okay, now someone's got to defend this guy, and I will do that. To this extent, he is right that crime in the city is an issue that plagues the entire region, and it prevents businesses from moving here, tourists from coming here, people wanting to raise their kids and stay here. I mean, if you look right now in the city of St. Louis, as of today, 154 homicides to date. And we kind of take that for granted, but that exceeds the number of homicides in all of last year. Excuse me, I want to make this point.
Right.
Than Nashville and Boston combined.
Okay, but that
and we take it for
But
granted.
the city is still the hub.
the
city is still the hub. So it is within he is within his purview, in my opinion.
I'm not, the one thing I'm not doing, and you can talk to him tonight, I'm not questioning his motivation, okay? I mean, I think
I am.
Well, we just did.
I'm not. No,
I am.
I know.
I'm questioning his motivation.
He's a
made the point.
politician
All right,
with
let me say,
higher...
he made the point on my show. He wants to start this discussion. Fine. I very strongly disagree with his
Methods.
conclusions, and I don't think it's helpful for one jurisdiction to be essentially taking shots at other, even if he is trying to start a regional discussion. The other thing is on the airport, no one's talking about the fact that the airport is the city's asset. The city owns the airport. That's a fact. It's not an opinion.
Mayor Jones didn't do that.
And the idea that somehow, well, you take the one wonderful asset the city has, which is, by the way, it's booked, I think on... It generates $6 million in profit for the city every year. It has, you know, for whatever you think are good, bad, or indifferent, it's got, I think, it's like $1 billion in basic net worth. If this was a business, it would be viewed.
It's $455 million in debt right now.
Yeah, but
and
I'm
it doesn't
telling
have
you,
a nonstop to San Francisco.
Excuse me.
With all due respect, the airport is an asset, but it's underperforming right now through no fault of Rhonda Hamm, or anybody else.
If it were a business, it would be extraordinarily worthwhile. And now
you're
for
out
everybody,
of your mind.
Oh no, it would.
Oh my
I'm
gosh,
not out
Ray,
of my mind.
have you been to Lambert
Yes, I
lately?
have. I
and
think
have you been to other airports around the nation? Okay, so
It's
you
a
then
function.
understand,
The issue,
even as airport
Charles,
leaders do, that it needs a lot of work.
But Charles,
there's a
no,
plan to do this.
the
Look,
airport-
they're working on a plan to do it. You know, but just...
But it's a regional asset.
Charles,
Come on.
but it's owned by the city. You're going to
He's got
just take
great
it away
ideas.
from the
Well,
city.
who said that?
Steve Elman has all these great ideas
yeah.
that won't cost St. Charles County a dime. So just drop that, man. I don't want to hear
We
about
don't
all
know
that
that.
regionalism.
The discussion will be half past this hour on what we call Next Up.
Hey,
When
ask-
Bill, and I'm not going to be here,
All
but
right.
Bill and Wendy
Right. Hey.
will do a great job.
Right.
What do you want them to ask?
And ask to Steve, is he so horrified he won't be down here at 1 o'clock tomorrow for the playoff game? With the
All right, okay.
All right.
I will. It's a good question.
Okay.
Bill McClellan.
I hope you wrote that question down.
I got it.
right here.
I got it.
Since we met last time, Mike Wolf, former Chief Justice for the Missouri Supreme Court and Dean of the St. Louis University Law School, wrote an op-ed in your paper. I think it was your paper.
It was.
It was, and he's against Amendment 3, which is the amendment facing Missouri voters in November, which, if approved, will allow for recreational use of marijuana. Among other things, Judge Wolf, who, by the way, also came out against it the same week as the Catholic bishops and the Missouri prosecutor, so there seems to be some opposition growing here. He doesn't like the way it's structured. He thinks it was paid for by the people who are going to benefit from it, this amendment, and that the recreational licenses will go to a select few. And they'll have these, and those are the people who currently hold the medical licenses. And a lot of people, including minorities, will be out of the action for at least 2 years, when then the licenses go up by lottery. Not based on experience or knowledge. We're going to hand out the licenses for selling marijuana based on a lottery. Don't you think he's right?
Experience.
Well, I wrote about this a couple of years ago, and I mentioned that, the governor hijacked the medical marijuana bill by putting Lynn Frackel in charge, who didn't know anything about it, who then Steve Tilley, the governor's good friend and Uber lobbyist, came up and said, hey, we can do this. And he started the Missouri Cannabis Association. And when it came time to award licenses, if you were giving money to Steve Tilley, you had a good chance, better chance of getting a license. And it was a complete mess. People who answered the same questions the same way got different scores. And it happened that if you were on Steve Tilley's team, you often got a higher score. It was, and in the column when I wrote about the hijacking, I said that the guy who should have been put in charge is Mike Wolf. So I think that what the governor did was a terrible thing. But if we don't pass this bill, this referendum now, then we have to depend on the legislature to legalize marijuana. And when you depend on the Missouri legislature to do anything, you're taking a great risk. So I'm one of those people who's going to vote yes, but very reluctantly.
It will be delayed for years, and all of that revenue, if we don't pass it now, that's how I see it.
I agree, and I would say this. I read that a little different. I know the headline was very strong, and you never know. I don't know what the nuances are. The headlines and the commentaries sometimes are not written by the same party. When I read it, he clearly has reservations about it. I don't know that I read it. Just reading the column, I think he's having trouble getting to yes, because he's got some reservations that I think are probably well-grounded in terms of this is clearly, could have been done differently and better. I don't think any question. I think there's far too much detail in it for a constitutional
39
amendment
pages, right?
And so forth. Having said that, I'm with Bill. And the only thing I disagree with Bill on is there's no question that if this doesn't pass, you're not going to see legalized. You're not going to see this for
I'd like
years.
to disagree. Why not just have, if you need to do this by constitutional amendment? I see the value in that, because then it can't be amended by the legislature, which happens all the time. So people want to get these constitutional amendments. Well, just reject this one, and then you and your friends put another one on the ballot.
It's not going to happen.
Right. I hear you, Charlie, but the same thing with, legalized gambling and all that. And so, meanwhile, years and years and years go by, and all these other people have figured it all out. By the way, we buy lots of things. Gasoline. Now, we need, you got to have gasoline, technically, all that. It might be a little different than, cannabis. But at the same time, people aren't sitting around saying, like, where is this money really going? Who is making money when I go to the gas station and all that? They just want to just buy their product and keep going.
Alvin,
let me finish. Also, if the whole concern for minority people is one of those who are like, well, just ask the people who are going to vote, and they would say, like, well, you know what? I would rather just legalize the marijuana. And then, too, if you ask, I would tell you this, throughout American history, if you ask black people, would you rather do it the way we have been doing it, or we put these business licenses up, or this property or that up for lottery? They would say, like, I'll take the lottery every time, because I got a better chance of winning.
I don't know about that, because the Post-Dispatch had a story 3 weeks ago where a lot of minority businessmen are shut out of this process, and they're upset with this amendment.
It was a lottery.
First of all, minority businesses are shut out of every process in the state of Missouri and have been for hundreds of years. But the thing is,
that is true.
Have you heard of worldwide technology?
The reason Amendment 3 is so important is A, prohibition has failed for marijuana as badly as it did for alcohol. B, what Wendy said about the lost revenue. C, how you always talk. No, here's the question. You're always talking about crime. If you want to do something about violent crime, freeing up the criminal justice system for all the
that's not the issue.
persecution.
The issue is this Constitution.
You've got to free up the resources.
What Wolf says, which I think is correct, and you can't deny, once you put an error in the Constitution, it's almost impossible to correct it.
I have a great deal of respect for Mike Wolf. We all do. But the fix is in when it comes to licenses. How many times have we heard that before? I mean, isn't that part and parcel? Isn't that part of the...
Well, it is a problem, though, that since it's Steve Tilley's Missouri Cannabis Association, the people who have the medicinal licenses are the only people
they've
who
got the inside track.
Exactly.
That's the way it's always been. And we're going to delay this forever.
Yeah, and then in 2 years, if it were to be this like lottery or whatever, I guarantee you that the same people will say, like, well, we can't have a lottery. Why? Because anybody might win.
That's right.
And that's all I want.
And when you talk about experience, can you elaborate on experience? When you said the licenses are attached to people who have no experience.
What's going to happen is everybody, myself included, will apply for a license only to win it and then sell it to a current holder of a medical
Charlie,
license. And that's the way it's going to work.
The status quo is unacceptable, period.
Okay.
It is.
Well, Alvin, I want to ask you about a lawsuit by the Attorney General of the state of Missouri and leaders from 5 other states. They're suing the Biden administration over the federal student loan program forgiveness. As you know, Joe Biden said that if you make up to $250,000 as a couple, you can take $10,000 off your student debt. And if you have Pell Grants, it's another $10,000. So some people will get $20,000 off. Schmidt, the Attorney General, has said, well, actually, an action like that by the president is only okay during a time of emergency, and this is not a time of emergency. But there are other aspects he doesn't like about it either. I happen to think it's too generous. I think a couple making $250,000 does not need $10,000 forgiven. $250,000 is...
That's a rug for some people.
It's 3 times the median household income in this country. So what do you think?
I think, first of all, if Mobile Exxon called Schmidt and said, I have an emergency, we need this, that, the other thing, he'd say, like, fine, okay? What I don't understand, well, one, I don't understand that, wait, you're running for office and the election is about 4 weeks away and looks like you're going to win, and by January you'll be the senator, so this won't even be filed by the time you're gone, so it's just more nonsense by him. And then 2, society is always asking for fairness, that if you're going to give something to somebody who's poor, then somebody who's rich should get the same thing, okay? Then we're looking at people, why do they have loans? Because they are seeking a higher education. They are going to college.
Bettering themselves.
Bettering themselves. So, no, let's sue to stop them from pursuing their dreams, possibly. And then 2, wait a minute, we're also suing on behalf, you don't get it, $250,000 people, and you don't get it, people who don't have $250 in your checking account and pray every night that your kid will have enough money to go to school the next semester. I don't get it. If there was one thing where everybody should stand up and applaud in every community, black, white, rich, affluent, poor, is that, hey, how about we help out families that their kids are doing the right thing? They're not criminals. They're not stealing. They're not out in the middle of the street. Well, you could be protesting, we can go to college. But the point I'm making is that why are we mad at people doing the right thing?
Well, and let me add something. Well said. But in addition to that, we are numb to Eric Schmidt's abuse of his office and abuse of Missouri taxpayers. It's absolutely appropriate, as a candidate for Senate, if Eric Schmidt wants to espouse his view, great. I mean, he has a right to say whatever he wants about the student loan forgiveness program. The idea that Missouri taxpayers should pay, which they are, with an amicus brief, with the resources of this office, to take a position on this. It just happens to be Eric Schmidt. This is like the 10th MAGA lawsuit, including the big one with Pennsylvania and the other states, that it's an abuse of our taxpayers' resources for him to engage us. And to Alvin's point, it's not even a question.
Okay.
Sure, there's people
There
that
are a lot of people who are frosty about this loan forgiveness in red silos and in blue silos. Okay?
But that doesn't mean we should, as a state.
And you're okay, but where is this forgiveness coming from? It's coming from the taxpayers, Ray.
That's an argument for the Senate. This is not costing Missouri state taxpayers money.
Of course it is.
No, it isn't.
$400 billion. Who do you think
Where do you think that's coming from?
That's a federal issue. It's not a state issue.
I'm with Alvin. All the money we give for this and for that, and here's people who are sending their kids to college.
$250,000 though for 10. I mean, they get a 10 grand.
Well, if a major business goes bankrupt, and we say, like, well, they're too big to fail, so let's give them some money.
Well,
right,
we're not in favor of that either.
No.
But I think Wendy's right. I mean, $250,000 is not someone who should get $10,000
That's not somebody
forgiven.
who's scraping by.
No,
Okay,
exactly.
That's too high. Maybe it should be 100,000. But the principle and the idea that we're going to help these people.
But
there are some people who paid off their loans or who chose not to go to college
some people
because they couldn't
off their
afford
house
it.
when the interest rate was 6%, you know, and now it might be 9%. You don't go back and say, like, you know what, we owe you 3% because times change.
But you're right, Alvin. If the person signed for a 6% loan, the person has to pay for it, and that's the deal. We're not bailing out homeowners, are we?
But the point is, you don't.
I don't think we are.
Right.
You know, we always talk about, let's talk local issues. This is not, in terms of the state taxpayers of Missouri, just like you can make your arguments about the pipeline that we spent money opposing. Joe Biden closing the pipeline. We fought about that. We've jumped in on affirmative action cases in other states. We jumped in on there's a whole bunch of cases where we have engaged Missouri taxpayers at our expense to have Eric Schmidt run political errands for MAGA and for his campaign.
Yeah, they might be expensive, but those lawsuits might be expensive, but they don't cost $400 billion.
But that's what he was elected to do. Why is it okay that Kim Gardner was elected to do her job,
excuse me,
but Eric Schmidt couldn't be?
His job is not to file amicus briefs in national cases. His job is to represent Missouri.
I think Ray,
if you take a look.
If the people agree with you, they won't elect him in November.
Well, then he's not running for Attorney General again. He's running for Senate.
But if people think that he's a terrible Attorney General.
He is a terrible. He's maybe the worst
With limited time, let's get to the remaining topics of the show and then discuss these online. You can always go to Twitter and use the hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Wendy, a couple of topics. One, when it comes to the jail, the mayor has found that problems at the jail won't go away. A couple of things right now. 6 people have died at the City Justice Center in downtown St. Louis this year. Deputy, or should I say interim public safety director, Dan Isom, has said that some died as a result of suicide, some from natural causes, some from drug overdoses. Some of the drugs came to the jail by the guards themselves. There is a jail oversight board, but now the Jones administration is not allowing that jail oversight board to go into the jail to inspect. And it seems to me that these problems might be alleviated a little bit if we were still allowing people to go to the old workhouse. What's your thought here?
I agree with you. I mean, it sounds like the Justice Center is chaos from top to bottom. They're talking about, I don't know if they ever had the locks fixed on the doors, because that was going to be $24 million. Now they're asking for body scanners. They have applied for funding for these body scanners to keep the corrections officers from bringing the drugs. The one corrections officer was found to have brought 30 fentanyl pills into the jail. But the body scanner, it's a huge problem, and we're just throwing money at it. And I don't understand why the workhouse isn't part of the solution.
I don't know that solves anything. You have the same problems there that you have at the place you're at, and it's closed. Fix where they're at. It's, you know, I mean, I feel for everyone involved, not the guards that are smuggling stuff in, but I just fix the problem there. And I also think, you know, a different administration in a different state at a different time would be hailed for taking this, you know, like, because people would be saying, like, who cares about a bunch of people in jail? Now, the Jones administration isn't taking that view, but I think in a way,
you're right, though. There are a lot of people who feel that way.
I'm on my own island on this, and that is, I'd like to see, you look at the county jail and the mess it is, and the city jail, I would like to see at least a consideration of a regional solution to this. You know, we have the regional cooperation on the major case squad, on Regis, on 911. We have for police. I think we ought to really look at, I don't know if there's any movement.
Where would it be?
I don't know. I just think the city and county both have problems. These are systemic problems that seem larger than any jurisdiction can have. And maybe we could bring in, God forbid, the other counties and try to look at this as a region. I just think it'd be nice.
I think you're going to have problems with a jail anywhere. I mean, we don't pay guards a whole lot of money, and the people who are in there because they're accused of doing crimes. I mean, it's just a festering place that's going to have problems.
Throw your coffee mugs at me, but should we privatize?
I was going to say Reid McClellan Incarceration Center and gambling casino.
That has been a proven failure everywhere. I think the resources issue you're talking about, if we could ever, and I know it's the kind of problem that's not sexy, but I'd like to see, I just think a regional approach to this might deal with those resources you're talking about. And privatization has been, of all the places, it's been a failure and corrupt. in prisons is right up there with it. And by the way, Enterprise Leasing was involved in that for a while. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it was a mess when they were involved with the private prison world. So, and everybody just didn't want to talk about that several years ago.
I don't know anything about that.
I
Well,
don't either.
I knew that they sold
No, they were in it,
supplies.
and
I didn't know
nobody
that
ever
other
wants
part.
to talk about them because you got to
I
be
know that
careful.
they
were in the business.
sold
They were
supplies.
in the business.
All right, I don't know that one,
But that's
Ray.
my point is,
All right.
we just no one wants to.
I don't think it
ever
has
deal
anything
with
to do with the downtown or the St. Louis County jail.
I just think
does
we
it?
ought to region. Like I said, I think a regional solution.
Well, I will say to your point about the part of the problem, according to some of the attorneys, for the accused of crimes in the jail, and that's what a lot of these people are, they're accused of crimes, is that there's overcrowding in the downtown jail right now. 6, 7 people in a cell and they're sleeping on floors. Well, if they had kept the medium security workhouse open on Hall Street, at least that issue wouldn't
Could
be
be
such a big one.
alleviated.
Well, there might be more people in there that are out walking the street right now because they couldn't hold them. I don't know.
All right. Hey, want to thank Ken Kunschel, St. Louis artist, who has given us the, at least on loan, curvilinear. And there you see it. It's above our mantle here on the Donnybrook set. Isn't that looking sharp? That's actually, Wendy, the Priory, is it not?
That's the Priory. Yeah, the Benedictine Abbey, the Priory Church.
Thank you, Mr. Kunschel, for sharing that with us here at 9 PBS. Let's go to the old mailbag. In the 1980s and 1990s, Chrysler products could be stolen with a flathead screwdriver. Our Dodge was stolen on 3 occasions. It was so bad nationally for Chrysler that car leasing companies dropped them from their fleets. Chrysler corrected that problem. That from Larry Minth. We also heard from Jeff Klayman, who wrote, "Defund the police is the most misleading political slogan ever. It shouts extremists. A better choice would have been support the police, reform and refund." Thank you, Mr. Klayman. You can write us care of 9 PBS, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. We love those tweets, hashtag DonnybrookSTL, and those emails, Donnybrook@9pbs.org. Our 9 line awaiting for your call, 314-512-9094, and you can listen or view us on your favorite podcast source, Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and TuneIn. That concludes the first segment, but don't go away. On Next Up, Steve Ellman, the aforementioned County Executive from St. Charles County, will join Bill and Wendy for a half hour of questions. Thanks so much.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.